All right. Welcome back. This is part two of the Chattanooga 70.3 race recap. And this is all getting into race day type stuff. Part one, that ended up all being pre race, team race weekend experience type stuff. But this is all going to be about race day, pre race, what went down in the race, and then, of course, the post race celebrations and experience as a whole. But to start things off, I do want to add one final thing that I forgot to include in part one. And this is really just like me building out the branding and design of tribal training. So I caught major inspiration from a certain hat inside of the Ironman store at Ironman Village. And this is just one of the things that I really love about building tribal and having something like this where there's always a new idea that I can bring to life. And I am currently rocking the 2024 Team Run hat. And I love this hat, right? I was building this one. If you've watched the video on how I built this out, I was really looking to have something that could be a staple hat for years to come. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be making more hats. And I was a little bit directionless on what the 2025 run hat will be. But I'll tell you what, I found it at Ironman Village at Chattanooga 70.3. I found a hat in the store that I really, really loved. And I immediately connected it to some other ideas of other hats that I've loved. So who knows? I'm just really sharing that because that's just something fun that I like to do is like I'm always on the look for something that can inspire me, that I can include into the branding and the design of tribal training. And things just speak to me, right? Sometimes it's just like that thing has presented itself as something that will be an inspiration for a future piece of tribal merch or tribal branding. So wanted to add that in because I was super jazzed about that. Now into race day. So this was a huge event for the team. This was the biggest team 70.3 that we'd ever had, right? Most organized 70.3 by a mile. We had 8 athletes at Muncie 70.3 back in September, but that was completely pieced together as a team race on the fly. Me flying out there, I'd only decided on that like a couple of weeks before the race. Even some athletes that did that race had only decided like 10 to 12 weeks before that race went down. So that experience was fabulous, but we didn't quite have the intention that went into Chattanooga 70.3. Now, we've also got 10 athletes getting into the arena together. That's the biggest team competition of all time. But layered on top of that is that this is my dad's first 70.3. And this is my first experience having coached my dad from no endurance experience, didn't even own a bike in October, to getting into this process together, to doing some training sessions, the times that he came out and visited in Boulder, to seeing him knock down 5 or 6 weeks straight of 50-mile rides and like just really committing to the process and buying into the commitment that it would take to get this goal taken down. And that was just like a whole different level of energy that was poured into this weekend. So me and my dad were, of course, staying together. We had Chunk in the house as well once he got in, and Charlie crashed with us for the night. So race morning, it was just super sweet to to get to see my dad go through the race morning experience. We all got up at around 3:30 Eastern. There was still the slight confusion of Central Time. I don't think my dad had switched over his phone to that secret hack that Charlie had shared, so might have been 2:30 wake up on his phone. But regardless, 3:30 wake up. The intention was to leave at 4:15. And that would have us getting to transition around 4:45. Transition was opening at 4:30, and that should give us plenty of time. And I would say that the overall vibe that I felt on race morning was that we were prepared and we had tons of extra time. I have had races where it just unfolds that there's so much urgency throughout the morning. And I don't know, based on the race setup or based on the way that you've organized your gear, you feel like you're racing around trying to do a million different things. And from the moment that we woke up in the house to the moment that I then sent off the team to dive into the swim, it felt like we just had time and we were at ease. That was the vibe that I felt. And it was a sweet vibe. We had a cabin, right? So we're waking up at 3:30 a.m. Of course, it's pitch dark out, right? We've got the dim lights on in the cabin, and there was just that cultivation of energy of we are calm and we are at peace, but we're heading into a day where we're going to do something that we've never done before. And my dad did a great job of getting prepped up the night before. He had loaded all of his bags into the car. So the only thing that he had to do was eat breakfast and get dressed, and we'd be on our way. Um, Charlie had all of his camera stuff charging overnight. He was fully ready to go. We had the tribal flag already loaded in the car. Chunk and I didn't have much else to do other than shower and get dressed. So we were really just pretty much ready to go once my dad ate. We were going to leave at 4:15, but we were ready at about 4, ready to roll. It was pretty cool. My dad, before we took off, he had asked me to draw the tribal axe on his wrist. So I took out a Sharpie, and I put together a great axe, in my opinion. I think that Charlie might have gotten a picture of it. It was pretty impressed. We were all pretty impressed with the axe that I threw down. My dad had asked me to draw an axe, and then he also asked me to draw a butterfly. And the butterfly signified we have I think she's officially a second cousin of mine on my dad's side of the family, a young girl named Penny who had a rare illness and unfortunately passed away within the past 6 to 12 months. And my dad had been very involved with that side of the family and just that whole experience that they went through. And a butterfly is really the image that the family had cultivated around, right? And my dad took a lot of meaning in that, and so the axe and the butterfly went inked up on his arm, right on the inside of his right forearm, so it'd be right there for him to see, sitting in Arrow on the bike, and got those down. And to me, it was just really cool to see my dad lean on things that meant a lot to him, right? Because this is a team experience, right? But we've all got our own individual meaning for each race and competition that we do. And for my dad, this was the first time that he'd been inside tribal training, right? And this is the first time that he'd really seen what I've built. And for him to really just like lean into it all and to want the axe, inked up on his arm was really cool for me to see. And then for me to also see that, like, he's taking a lot of inspiration from what could certainly be perceived as a real tragedy that our family had faced. And that just meant a lot for me to just like observe my dad coming at this challenge from a very, very well-rounded and holistic standpoint. So I really dug that. And once I inked him up with those two images, we were basically off on our way. We took 3 cars. Charlie drove. He had a Suburban loaded up with, he brought down a cooler for me. He brought down a bunch of chairs for me. My brother had picked up a tent, an 8x8 tent at Walmart. And, this is kind of the stuff that like people see, right? That I build tribal and I do all these different things, but they don't really understand how much of a team it really takes. I'm flying in from Denver, and so I'm coming with the tribal flag that I've got, but I'm not flying with chairs and fucking tents and all this stuff. So Charlie's driving from Louisville. I'm like, Charlie, would you be able to bring a cooler for post race stuff for guys? And do you have any chairs that you can bring? My brother is driving from North Carolina. I'm like, Chunk, could you just stop at Walmart and get like a cheap 8x8 tent that we can pop up so we can have some shade and kind of mark our spot? And both those guys just really helped me out and hooked it up. And we had all that stuff loaded into the car. My brother also had his dog down there, so my brother was going to drive separately so that he could come let out his dog. Actually, he was bringing his dog in the morning, and he was going to drop off the dog midday. And then my dad and I, we just drove in the rental car that we had, and we got down to the race venue at whatever it was, right about 4:45 or so, and we parked in a parking deck that was basically on the same block as transition. And my dad headed in to drop off his stuff. I posted up with the tribal flag, got that thing flying. And my brother and Charlie and I just hung there. And very quickly, we just started to see tribal guys. It was freaking awesome. I mean, of course, the flag is a big landmark, but it was also like pitch dark in the middle of the morning. And the way that the transition entrance was set up was it was kind of like just on a street where there were a few trees around. So it wasn't like the flag was the only thing flying, only thing up in the air. But it was sweet to just be able to see everybody. And the other thing that I just noticed from basically set up at transition is that guys were good to go. Like my dad was in there, his bike had already been loaded up from the day before. He dropped off his fuel stuff, but that was basically it. Like there wasn't this big runaround of I've got a million different things to do. And so the team started to organize around the flag. And I had said that the plan would be for us to send all of them off onto the shuttles that would drive them 1.5 miles up the river to the swim start. They would do that at 6:15. But the gang was basically organized by like 5:50. So by about 6, I was like, listen, you're all here. You know, we had grabbed a couple of team picks. I was basically like, listen, let's just go ahead and get this thing moving. Let me see. There are a couple of other things that I want to mention real quick, though. There was this hilarious situation with Aaron Burke that Charlie totally captured on camera, and just some of the hilarity of this stuff. I just got to add it in here. So, one of the things I was a little bit cognizant of on the day before the race was I was like, I need to make sure that all these guys know their fuel plan and that they have like a good setup for the day. Like I'd been checking in, of course, with all the athletes, right, in their own individual prep and their own individual build. We had been doing all the accelerator calls, right? So I'm on the phone or on these calls with these guys, essentially every week leading up to the race. But those calls weren't so much like tactical training. They were more about mindset and visualization and goal setting and things like that. And so there was a little bit of a part of me the day before the race that I'm like, shit, I want to make sure that all these guys are like 1,000% set on their plan. And Trevor needed a little bit of help. So I'm like, who has extra fuel that I can organize for Trevor? I was sending in just like the general metrics that we want to be hitting on the team chat. And I send in that, hey, we want to be hitting, about 300 calories an hour, 2 water bottles, 40 ounces of water an hour. And for the first timers that are doing this, we want to be carrying 4 hours worth of fuel on us. It's probably not going to take you 4 hours, but we want to have 4 hours worth of fuel, which is about 1,200 calories. So I send that in. Then I'm chatting with Aaron Burke as we're all hanging around waiting to board the shuttles. And I'm like, how are you feeling your fuel? Tell me about your fuel plan. And he's like, I'm good. I'm going to take down one tailwind at about mile 20. Then I'm going to take down a tailwind and another gel at about mile 50. And in my head, I'm like, okay, well, that's not nearly enough. So I'm like, all right, well, how many calories is that? He's like, about 650. I'm like, okay, did you see my message into the chat yesterday? He's like, yeah. And so I was kind of just like, okay. So you got half as much, right? And so there was kind of this funny little exchange where he was like, oh, fuck, you're right. Like, I'm not listening, and I should be. And I helped him just reframe his thinking to, you don't want to wait to fuel at mile 20. Like, you should have that first tailwind and then some down by mile 20. And you don't want to wait till mile 50. You want to have a lot more down by mile 50. And so shout out to Aaron. He was very receptive. He was very coachable in that moment. And we got to laugh back at that at the end of the race because he ended up smoking the bike and he ended up following a bit more of the plan that I had detailed for him. And it was just kind of one of those funny things, right? It's like, listen, I can give you guys all of the exact metrics to hit. I can tell everybody this is the perfect plan. Boom, boom, boom. But we all got our own little mindset on what we think we need, what we think we want to do, what we think we're going to be good with. And that's just part of this process, man, is being open to being coached up a little bit, to being open to saying, hey, this plan that I got, why am I thinking that taking down half as much as coach said is going to be a good idea for me? And so shout out to Aaron. That was pretty funny. And Charlie and I were laughing our ass off about that. Once the dudes all started the race, I was like, dude, that thing with Aaron and 650 calories, he's like, dude, that was awesome. So we basically send all the guys off on the shuttle. And I was kind of wondering, like, how am I going to get up to the swim start? Because the swim start is 1.4 miles. That's the swim distance of this race, a little longer than the usual 1.2 of a 70.3. I'm like, there's a river path that we can just walk up, and it'll be a little more than a mile walk. We can probably get there in about 25 minutes or so. So let's just sort of plan to do that. Charlie will have his content stuff. I'll have my flag, and we'll just sort of figure it out. Well, the perk here, so shout out to B. Riley, because B. Riley, he knew he'd be blazing through this race. So B. Riley actually got on the shuttles before everybody else. He's like, listen, I'll see you guys down there, but I want to make sure that I can get into the front of the swim wave. So I'm just going to go right now. I'm like, beautiful. You go up there. But not only that, send me your location once you get up there, because he had his phone. He was going to put it in his swim bag that they were going to get you after the race. So B. Riley drops me his location, and I get to do the GPS from my phone right to it. And it says that it'll take like 41 minutes to walk there. And it says it'd be a 6-minute drive. And so I'm like, all right, Charlie and Chunk, let's adapt here. There's no reason for us to walk. We're going to be like huffing and puffing it the whole time. And I'm going to be staring at my phone, wondering if this GPS projection is going to take a fucking 10-minute jump or if it's really going to take the whole thing. So I'm like, let's just get in the car. So we hop in the car, and it works out great. They were able to basically see exactly where these bus shuttles are taking these guys. And the shuttles are all these school buses, right? So it's super obvious where they're going. We see the spot where they turn around at this restaurant called the Boathouse. And Charlie, Chunk, and I, we park in like this gas station or something like that right across the street. And we are super easily able to just walk across the street and start to hop on this river walk. And we basically come in from the backside of the swim entrance. So the swim entrance is basically, it's almost like this access road where there's there's a river path on, if you're walking down it, and the river's to your right. There are a bunch of trees that are along the river, so you can't actually see the river from there. There's a river path that's right on the inside of the trees. Then there's like this road that, like, I don't know, maybe like city utility vehicles would maybe go down. Then on the left side, there's trees. So you're kind of in this canopy of trees, and they've got a bunch of porta potties lined up on the left side of this access road. And there are athletes fucking everywhere, right? And the swim start is down at the end of this thing. And so we get in there, and I immediately see Logan and Mason in line for the porta potty. I'm like, boom, we got tribal guys. Boom, we're locked in. I'm like, where's everybody else? They're like, they're farther down there. So Charlie and Chunk and I have the flag. The flag is fully extended, and I am just marching through every single athlete. And I swear this was the best marketing I have ever done in tribal. Better than anything online, better than any video that I've posted. I am just charging through this thing, and every single athlete, Charlie is just seeing every athlete look at this flag and just look up at the tribal logo with the tribal training text right above it. And we're walking through this thing, and all of a sudden I'm like, all right, we're walking through. They've got the sign for the 55-minute swim projection. I'm like, all right, hopefully nobody's here. Because I told all the guys, we're going to start together, and we are going to start in a front swim wave. I don't care if you think you're going to take 50 minutes. We're starting up sub 40 is what I told them. So we're seeing the 55-minute thing. No, guys. I'm like, okay. We're seeing the 50-minute. I'm like, no, guys. Okay. We get up eventually to the 40-minute thing, and I'm like, I still haven't seen anybody. This is kind of interesting. Like, there's no way that I missed them, but are they really this far up? And we keep going. 35-minute. No, guys. I'm like, okay. Then all of a sudden we get up to the very front of the swim start, and all the guys are together in this corner of grass that's off to the left. And I am like, this is the perfect freaking spot. We've basically got our own section, right? So I go there, I see the guys, they're all hanging there. I plant the flag, boom, we've got our territory marked. But even better than all of that is that having this section off in the corner, it's this grassy area. It's right underneath this overpass. So there's a couple of cars parked there. There's like a fence there for some construction shit. But it basically created the opportunity where the guys were able to take a bunch of leaks. They were able to pee 2, 3, 4 times, some of them. And we totally avoided the anxiety that comes with being alone before a race, waiting in line, The porta potty lines are long as hell. Mason, who I had seen in the beginning, he's like, dude, I ended up waiting in that line. And then he said he bailed on it. And he came down and he was hanging out with us. So it was perfect because he's like, dude, I was waiting in line and it wasn't moving. Right. And I'm like, dude, I know that feeling. I've been in those lines before. It's not easy on the mind. And so we basically and this was the idea. It was like, listen, I had told the guys, we're just staying together. This is the team idea. We are staying together and we're going to meet up there and I'm going to meet you at the flag. I don't know exactly how this is going to work, right? But we're going to give ourselves enough time. We're going to meet there at 6:40, but we were already ahead of time because they had gotten on the buses 15 minutes early. I'm like, we're going to stay with the team and everybody's got their own individual needs, right? Like if you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the bathroom and you got to take care of you. But we are going to stay together as a unit so that we can create a situation where everybody can then be at peace, setting themselves up for success to start the race, right? And so it just worked out perfectly. I was able to get the flag loaded up. All the guys were there. I was able to help guys load up their freaking wetsuits. I was like yanking wetsuits up Matt Dalton's arm, up Aaron's arm. I'm like getting them all the way up on their shoulders. They're like, oh, dude, that feels so much better. I'm like, let's go. We're locked in here. I'm getting you guys good to go. A bunch of guys were taking in their final bits of pre-race fuel, right? Some honey stinger waffles or whatever else, a couple gels. Some guys had some drinks. And the energy around the group was calm and powerful. And we were all ready to go do this thing, right? But we were at ease about it all. And to me, what stuck out most actually in this environment was Mason. Right. Mason had done Muncie 70.3 and did not finish the swim. And this was his redemption. And I mentioned in the last pod that at the pre-race, pre-swim that we did, I still saw some anxiety in him, right? And we were doing the finger drag drills and I was trying to calm his heart rate. And I was still seeing that nervous energy when we were doing that swim. But on race morning, being with the team, being there with plenty of time, like I could just see it in Mason's entire aura that he was at ease. He was ready to do this thing. And so we were getting prepped up there. It was awesome to just see my dad there in the swim start, right? We're about to go do this thing. National anthem plays. And I think B. Riley ended up going up just ahead because he was about to smoke the swim in like 25 minutes. But outside of that, we had every athlete start together. I think Logan ended up being off on his own a little bit, but the other number of guys, I sent them off, right? I wasn't standing exactly where they enter the water, so they basically just start to walk up and go through the actual chute that takes you right to the start. And it was just amazing to have them all start at the same time because that then set the whole day up for guys just coming through one by one, right? They're not all doing the exact same time, but we don't have some weird gap where it's like one guy started and one guy didn't start for 40 more minutes and then they're doing the race 30 minutes apart. So there's these hour time gaps. Like everybody starting together helped everybody enter the race with some peace of mind. And it also just made it amazing for tracking all day long. So I send the guys off, and then Charlie Chunk and I, we take the flag and we head back to the car. And the next thing that we do is we head to this bridge where they're swimming under. And it was really cool. We were able to just have a vantage point on the swim that I've never had before. Like you're up on a bridge, you can see basically all the way down to the swim start. And then they're coming through the bridge and you can see where they'll end. And the whole time we are scouting to see who has a sleeveless wetsuit where we can spot their tribal kit, right? And we're hanging there, we're looking around, we're trying to track these guys. And as we're standing there, my brother Chunk, he's in a tribal shirt, of course, and there's this woman there, and she's like, oh, are you with tribal training? And Chunk's like, yeah. And she's like, I follow some of those guys online. And I'm like, this is so fucking cool. I'm standing right there, and I'm like expecting her to say that she follows me, right? I'm wondering what she's going to say. And she's like, yeah, my daughter, she's doing this race and she follows some of those guys on Twitter. So I'm like, again, expecting she's probably going to, does she follow me? Like, who's she talking about? And she goes, yeah, she follows Phil Lee. And I'm like, that's just awesome. Like, she's seeing another guy on the squad and she's following his stuff. And she's seeing what the team is about through him. And she's actually from the Indy area, and she was doing her first 70.3 and she was doing it solo. So her mom was like, hey, of course she's looking for a group, right? So that was just kind of rad. It was hilarious to just see people cruising through the swim. Plenty of just athletes in general doing breaststroke. We saw one guy doing backstroke, and then he turned it around and got back into freestyle, which was hilarious. And then shout out to Chunk, because Chunk spots my dad. He spots the kit. It's my dad. We see my dad enter the one side of the bridge, come out on the other. And it was just really cool because it was like, I knew my dad was going to do the race, right? And I had a ton of faith and belief in him and his ability to get it done. But it was another thing to be like, he's fucking down there swimming. Like, he is literally doing it. And I'm watching him just make progress through the swim, which was really, really special. We didn't see any other athletes from up there because basically once we saw my dad cross and go under the bridge, that was pretty close to the exit. So Chunk and Charlie and I, we then raced down to the exit, and we see my dad come out. At this point, B. Riley had already finished the swim. Trevor had finished the swim, but my dad was third out of the water for tribal. And I see my dad come out, and I'm right at the exit, and I'm like, let's go, Dad. Like, how'd it go? And he's like, I'm glad it's over. And so I'm like, shit, like, hopefully he's hanging on okay. What it ended up being was more of just the fact that was his first 70.3 swim, and you're always stoked to be through the swim. But he was still doing quite well. At that point, then Charlie and Chunk and I, we immediately hustle up so that we can be on the bike start, right on the other side of transition. And so we go up there, we get into position, and I'm waiting for my dad to come out. I'm waiting to see the tracker say that he finished T2 or T1. And all of a sudden, I'm getting updates that other athletes are coming out because now other athletes have finished the swim. My dad did the swim in like 37 minutes. Phil was like 37. He was just a few seconds behind my dad. Aaron, I think, was like 40 or 41. I think Dalton was right around there. Stefanos was right around there. So a bunch of guys had finished the swim right after my dad did. And all of a sudden, I'm standing outside of transition, and the other athletes start to come before my dad. So I'm like, what the fuck is my dad doing in there? I'm like, we specifically spoke about transition not taking him a long time. Just because you don't need to, right? Like, it's not a huge deal if you take a while in transition, but like, he was just asking me about things that I see from first timers. And I'm like, sometimes first timers just really dilly dally in transition. And like, you just don't need to. Like, you don't need to be rushing through it, but race with some urgency, right? Like, let's go, let's get moving. And so my dad finally, I get the notification that my dad clocked out of transition. So I'm like, great, we're going to see him in a second. I'm like, it was a 12-minute transition. What the hell was he doing? And my dad rides by and he goes, I just ate some fucking sunscreen. I thought it was a power bar. And so what it ended up happening was that once you get into transition, they've got a table of like sunscreen little gel packs. And my dad had mentioned power bar, but really what he meant was a gel. And my dad thought that they were gels, and he ripped one and slurped it down, and then instantly realized that it was sunscreen. And then he was trying to mess with his heart rate strap or something like that. So really nothing bad in the sense that, like, I don't know, he was all out of sorts in transition. I mean, I guess he was out of sorts in the sense that he just ate sunscreen, but it was reasonable that he was in there for a while, I guess is my main point. It was awesome to see him sent off. Before him, I had seen Aaron. I gave Aaron a great high five as he was riding by on the bike. That was awesome. Saw Phil take off. Saw Stefanos. Stefanos was locked in. He had the Aero helmet. He's on the TT bike. He was dialed. Saw Matt Dalton just behind my dad. And then we were waiting to see Logan. Since Logan had started a little bit late, he was really the last guy we were going to be seeing. And Charlie and I see Logan, and I'm like, Logan, how you doing? And Logan goes, great swim, with just a huge emphasis on great. And to me, that was Logan's energy all day long, just like racing his own race and finding ways to be confident in his own process. That was what I loved to see most out of Logan. And that wrapped up really the first part of the day here. After that, Chunk and Charlie and I We head off to get breakfast. None of us were in the mood or the need to take down a big breakfast at 4 a.m. with my dad before a race. So we were running on coffee and water. And so we headed out to grab breakfast at Frothy Monkey, cool little spot in Chattanooga. I had remembered that they have those in Nashville, and I used to live in Nashville. So we happened to be actually en route to another breakfast spot, and then I saw Frothy Monkey. I'm like, oh my god, Frothy Monkey is amazing. We're going there. So we're hanging out. Charlie, this is a great opportunity for us to get some food, and then Charlie also able to grab some photos from the morning, which is great because, I like to be able to share in real time, like some updates throughout the day, both in the tribal chat as well as like on social, on Twitter, on Instagram. I also sent in some video updates to the team, into the team chat, the full tribal chat. And this is just one of the fun things about race day, is that like there's the opportunity to really bring athletes who are all over the country. Like I can bring them into the experience by sharing some videos, by sharing some photos. And I am intentional to create a little bit of FOMO, right? Because this is a huge team race, man. We got 10 athletes down here. And if you're on Team Tribal and you're wanting to do 70.3s, man, like this is the way to do it. And so I'm down to show you exactly what we're doing down here. And so I sent in a video update, got to share some updates from the morning, shared about my dad's sunscreen thing, and shared some photos from Charlie, which was sweet. And then this was also like our own process, me, Charlie, and Chunk, kind of adapting throughout how the day was going to unfold. And our plan was to go see the guys out at around mile 30 on the bike. But by the time that they all, got through transition and out onto the bike, and by the time that we got to the car and got to breakfast, they were cruising through the bike well. And so all of a sudden it was starting to dawn on me, like, I don't know that we should go try to get them. I looked up the GPS to the church that I had scouted at mile 30, and it was like nearly 40 minutes away. So I'm like, by the time that we get down there, like, we're gonna have to hightail it back to see them through transition 2 and then on the start of the run. And at this point, freaking B. Riley is like nearly finishing the bike. He had smoked the swim, and by the time that we had waited for everybody to get through transition 1, like B. Riley was smoking this thing. So he's like got less than 5 or 10 miles left. I'm like, he's going to come in, and like, that's the start of the team going into the back half of the day. And so we made the adjustment to not go out and see them on the bike, which then I didn't quite realize. So my plan was to get some waters and some ice and some other recovery drinks out while we were scouting on the bike. I'm like, we'll just stop at a Walmart or something like that, and I'll get a bunch of drinks because I want guys to have stuff after the race as we're at the team tent and at the flag, hanging after the race. And that didn't happen. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll just figure that out later in the day. So we end up going basically back to the exact same spot that we saw the guys start the bike, because they came in and out of transition at the exact same point. So we see guys coming in on the bike. We see, there was something pretty funny. We see Stefanos come in, and Stefanos is, again, he's looking dialed. And so I'm like hyping him up. I'm like, dude, you smoked the bike, right? Because at this point I can see all of their times. I can see their mile per hour averages, and all the guys did extremely well. I was very impressed. And Stefanos comes in, and we're hyping him up, and I can like visibly see him get an adrenaline boost because he starts to crank on the pedals, and he's literally coming into the stop. We were supposed to dismount. So the volunteer is like waving his hands. He's like, stop, stop, stop. And Stefanos, pulls up and hops off the bike. I see my dad come in, and I'm like, you smoked the bike. My dad did it in over 17 miles an hour, which I thought was amazing. I didn't even know at the point that he had a couple of mechanicals on the bike. His seat post was sliding down. He had to stop to fix that. He had dropped a water bottle that he had gone back for very briefly. So it was not a start to finish, move through the course type of an effort. He had a couple of stops and turnarounds and still averaged over 17, which I thought was amazing. And when I asked him how he was doing when he came in, he said, awesome. So I was like, sweet, right? I was a little bit concerned about the post-swim comment. I didn't know what to think about the sunscreen thing, but coming off the bike, we're headed to the run. We're about to get this thing done. So I see my dad come through transition and send him off on the run. And then At that point, we head to Tribal Bridge. So Chattanooga has this really, really beautiful bridge that the athletes cross. They cross it at mile 6 and at mile 12, about. And so we head onto the bridge, and we've got the flag, and we post up basically right in the middle of this thing. And at this point, B. Riley had actually, like, we had sort of missed him. Like, he was about to finish the race. You kind of do this little, like, lollipop loop type thing, this little turnaround. So we did not see him on the bridge. I see the notification that B. Riley finishes. Right as we arrive to the bridge, we see Trevor, and I asked Trevor, "How you doing?" And Trevor's like, "It doesn't get better than this." And so basically, like, every time that I'm asking somebody how they're doing, or I'm just seeing them, like, I'm looking for some insight into their mindset and their vibe. And Trevor saying that, I was just like, boom, like, mindset. Like, this dude is locked in, and he's just enjoying this, man. Like, he's bringing a positive attitude to this day. And it was great to see him. We then set up the flag, and we've got a little bit of time before the next group is going to start to be coming through, like, kind of the next wave of people, because B. Riley was way up in front. B. Riley did this thing in 4:36, and then Trevor did this thing in 5:43 was his time, and I think like 6:30 was kind of the next round of finishers coming in. So we see Trevor, we get set up, and then very, very notable to me, I get a call from B. Riley. And B. Riley's like, "Where are you at, dude? I want to come cheer on the team." And that to me just meant a lot. This is B. Riley's first team race, and B. Riley is an incredible athlete, right? He crushed this thing. And I didn't know if he's going to want to, like, hang for a while, right? Like, he's probably crippled, right? He just smoked a 70.3. But instantly he comes up and is looking to support the rest of the squad. So that really stuck out to me. And it was great to immediately get to chop it up with B. Riley on his race. How'd the race go, right? And he dominated the bike. I think he was over 24 miles an hour on the bike. And he really did great on the run, but he finished the run grinding. Like, he really left it all out there. His timing splits, at least on the Ironman app, his actual watch wasn't as dramatic as this, but he ran the half marathon at 7:31 pace, and the Ironman chip tracker had, like, his last little segment at like 13-minute mile. And B. Riley was telling us about how he was almost like side shuffling. He got some hilarious photos from the Ironman photos coming across the bridge, and his face is just grimacing as he's just holding on for dear life and putting out an amazing effort. We got some laughs about the kit. The kit wanted 4:33. The kit didn't get 4:33. But in my opinion, B. Riley's 4:36 is more impressive than my 4:34 at Oregon 70.3. I got the 20-minute swim, and B. Riley, he didn't quite have that kind of a current and still smoked the swim. So shout out to B. Riley coming back out there. The next wild thing that goes down is that all of a sudden we're standing there, and we see this lady come through, and she, right as she passes us, she starts to collapse. And it just so happens that she has like 2 family members of some sort that are like right there. They must have been just knowing that she was struggling. And they basically like catch her as she's going down. But instantly I'm like, this lady, like, she needs help. And so the people that are with her, they're immediately asking us for support. And so I've got a gallon of water. I give her my gallon. Charlie has an element. He gives her the electrolytes. I start shouting out, like, "Are there any runners with extra fuel? Who has extra fuel?" Some dude throws up a gel who was like kind of running past us. And it was like, I saw this gel coming in like slow motion. It was a Black Martin gel. I see it floating up. Charlie's watching me run after this thing. I catch this thing in midair. The guys that are helping this lady, they're like, she doesn't need any gels. I'm like, she needs fuel. She needs fuel. It doesn't matter what it is. Water, electrolytes, calories. She needs anything she can get. Like, she's completely depleted. She might not want a gel, but she needs a gel. And so they're attending to her, and they tell us that she's done tons of these. So she must just be having a tough day for some random reason, but she's not like a first timer that's just like randomly crippled. So we're sort of monitoring her get sorted out. And she's like laying there on the side of the bridge. And she's got people attending to her. And so we're just like, all right, she's kind of settled. And shortly after that, we start to see the tribal guys start to roll through. So next, Phil comes through. And what I ended up learning was that these guys coming up over the bridge, they would see the tribal flag before they would see us and before we would see them. And they all knew I better be looking good when I run by Ryan and the guys. And Phil comes up, and Phil just looks like he's just motoring along. Like, he looks super strong to me. And he goes, I think a PR is in play. I'm like, fucking right it is, Phil. Let's go. And I was feeling great about seeing Phil just looking strong. Aaron comes through. He's looking strong. I run with Aaron for a little while, give him a nice slap on the ass, send him off to the back half of the run. I think my dad might have been the next to come up. I'm not totally sure, but my dad comes up and I'm like, fuck yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing my dad on the run, aside from sending him off on the run start. And I can tell that he's doing good, but he's telling me that he's cramping a little bit. And even in training, you know, sometimes in runs, like my dad would cramp, and I just know, like, he's just a tight dude generally, you know, not exactly locked into the 30 minutes a day, you know, mobility stretching protocol. So I'm like, all right, you know, he's cramping up, you know, just keep hydrating, keep managing the effort, you know, see what we can do to manage this. And he actually cramps a little bit running with me. Like, I start running kind of down the backside of the bridge, and he cramps a little bit with me. So I'm like, all right, you know, we're 6 miles into this thing, and he's having a cramp, like, you know, make him slow up for a second. So I'm like, we'll see how the back half of this thing goes. You know, I know he's going to get it done, but how's he going to get it done? We'll see. Shortly after that, Matt Dalton comes through, and my biggest observation about Matt Dalton is that this dude is a fucking athlete, man. This dude is an athlete. I'd been chatting with Matt Dalton on the phone, right, many times. He's been on tons of the accelerator calls, but he's a lawyer. And so when I'm seeing him on Zoom, he's usually, you know, he's in an office. He's usually in a shirt and tie. And he's got, like, you know, this deep Southern drawl, which to me, I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, I'm just seeing him in kind of like a non-athletic sense, I'd say. And on the course, Matt Dalton just looks like that fucking dude, like, in a good way. He looks like that dude in a sense that is like, that dude's getting it done. And, you know, he's got the backwards Hoka hat. He's got the kit on. He's got some fresh running shoes. He's got the mid calves on. You know, Matt Dalton's he's around my size. He's you know, somewhere around 6 foot, 5'11", around 180 pounds. And I'm just like, dude, this guy is so legit. And Matt Dalton, when he came into training, he had done sprints before, but he's like, dude, I don't know how I would be able to do a 70.3, not only just like physically, but like, he's a lawyer. He's got 3 kids, ages 1 to 4. Like, the dude's not exactly just floating around with free time. And I'm like, listen, dude, we can get this done. No problem at all. We'll make it work. And then, you know, he did amazing throughout the whole process, right? We made sure that he hit the check marks that he needed, built the confidence that he needed. But then, like, really seeing him out on the run, I'm like, let's fucking go, Dalton. You are this guy. Next guy's coming through, Stefanos. I got to shout Stefanos out. Stefanos, I didn't know until after the run, he walked 12 miles of the run, power walked it at 13-minute miles, but he walked 12 miles of the run. And I think that the mile that he ran was the 2 times that he saw me. Because I saw Stefanos coming across that bridge. I'm like, this dude looks fucking legit. And the thing that sticks out most to me about Stefanos is that I met Stefanos at the Do Hard Things conference back in August. And this was before he had joined Tribal. And I had seen Stefanos on Twitter, and I had seen him riding 100 miles. I'm like, this dude can do it. And he and I had actually hopped on the phone at some point before. And between that phone call and the times that I saw him at Do Hard Things, Stefanos was very locked on why he could not. And Stefanos had some kind of medical condition with his lungs or something when he was younger, and there was some kind of concern on your heart rate isn't allowed to go over XYZ beats, right? And so this is why he was able to ride his bike so much, is that he could manage his heart rate on the bike. but he thought that he couldn't run because anytime that he would run, his heart rate would skyrocket, right? And so the 2 times that I'd ever been with Stefanos before he was even inside tribal, he was very focused on why he could not. And I got to give a huge shout out to Brandon, assistant coach Brandon Luttrell. Brandon coaches Stefanos, and Brandon has done an amazing job guiding Stefanos through 3-sport training, building him up, and instilling confidence in Stefanos. And Stefanos has done an amazing job showing up and doing the work and staying committed and being optimistic about what he can do. And to me, like the vibe of Stefanos' just aura as a person, this whole race weekend, it was so different than the Stefanos that I had met at the Do Hard Things conference back in August. And when I see Stefanos out on the run, he's just moving along, running at his pace, looking steady, smiling away. And I was just like, man, you know, that dude is just doing his thing. And similar to Logan, I'm like, he is running his race. And he is managing his effort, and he's just moving along really, really well. And so I was just so stoked to see that. And to me, that was just, you know, a real indication of just the progress that Stefanos has made as an athlete and the success that Brandon has had with him, which is just like amazing for me to witness because, you know, I'm like kind of oversight on their process, but they're the two that are doing it, right? They're the two that are doing it. Next up, I see Logan. And Logan is already locked in on a 4-1 run walk strategy. And very similarly to how Logan said, great swim, right? When I saw him on the start of the bike, Logan had an extremely intentional attitude and an attitude of positivity, of being confident in his own plan and in making his way through this race, you know, with confidence and purpose, I'd say. And I was just impressed to see Logan already locked in on that 4-1 run walk because, you know, sometimes that's like a backup plan for guys, right? But Logan, you know, based on the training plan that he put in and based on his intentions for the day, like he was committed to that from the jump, which was awesome. After Logan, I saw Mason. And so with Mason, I was trying to see Mason start the bike, right? Because the whole thing is I want to see Mason finish the swim. He didn't finish the swim in Muncie. And so I got the notification on the phone that said that Mason finished the swim, 51 minutes. I was like, let's go, Mason. I messaged the tribal group, but somehow we missed Mason starting the bike. Somehow. I'm not totally sure. And so I hadn't seen him all day. And on the run at mile 6, this was the first time that I was going to see him on the course. And when I see Mason, he is drenched in sweat and full of smiles. That was what I observed. And he's got these fresh ass pink running shoes on, just looking like speed. But more than that, it was just like his intention on his mindset was so obvious to me. And I also love that he was drenched in sweat because I'm like, he's fucking working, man. He's working. Like the idea of just being positive and running your own race doesn't mean that you're just lollygagging through this thing. Like these guys are all pushing themselves, Mason included. And I guess actually where I saw him. So I had seen everybody on the bridge, but with Charlie there, we wanted to get a couple of different content shots and not just have everything be the bridge. So we actually went down the bridge and then made a right. And it was kind of like this southern kind of like side neighborhood street in a way. There's some trees, there's some brick buildings. And that was where I saw Mason. I got to run with Mason for a few steps, which was great. And he was doing really well. His instant feedback was that he was feeling strong, which just, you know, made me feel amazing just to see him doing it. I was so proud of him. And that was essentially sending guys off onto the second lap, 2-loop run here. And so let's see. Next thing here is we're back on the bridge, and B. Riley has finished. Trevor came through again. Trevor finished. And then we see Phil again. And so seeing Phil again, I'm wondering, how's Phil going to be doing? Right? Like we're in the end of this race here. And when I see Phil, like visibly, he looks so similar to how he looked on the first lap. Like he looks strong and he just looks like he's motoring through this thing. But on the first lap, Phil was the one who just outwardly said, I think a PR is in play. And I see him again, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, he looks great, but he hasn't said anything about the PR. So I have to ask. I'm like, Phil, where's your pacing at? How you doing? And he's like, I think a PR is still in play. And I'm like, let's fucking go. And I get super hyped up for him. And Phil, it's almost like you could just see the flames flying off his sneakers. He bursts into another little jolt of energy. He ends up sharing from his Garmin data that he jolted into a 7-minute mile pace that he didn't even know he could do in general, let alone at mile 12 of 70.3. And he darts off and he charges on towards the finish, setting a big time PR, which was just really cool for me to see because, so much of the idea of putting out a personal best is like your own performance, right? And how could the training be better? And how can you get faster and this and that? But now that I've been at enough of these team things, there's a big element to having the team support and, me being able to hype you up on the course to, holy shit, man, I got some adrenaline that I didn't know I had, right? Like Stefano's finishing the bike super strong. And Phil, all of a sudden, he's at nearly mile 70 of a 70.3, and he's clipping off a 7-minute mile pace. And so that was really, really awesome to see. Once Phil finished, so we had 3 guys in, and then the next wave of guys were a little bit behind Phil. And so I'm thinking about this time, I'm like, okay, well, now this is the opportunity to set up the team tent and the cooler and the chairs and the finish. Now, I got to also say, we had given up our waters and our resources when this lady passed out, right? Basically, right when we got to the bridge. And we'd been out in the heat of the day, man. So I'm like grinding a little bit. Like I've been running up and down this bridge, right? I've been giving out a ton of energy to people on the course, and I haven't had any fucking water in like 3 hours. I'm sunburnt to shit. And I'm like, okay, I gotta take care of myself here a little bit. And what I had realized in observing the finish line was I was like, okay, at Muncie 70.3, we had the team tent set up like basically right outside of the finish line. And at Muncie 70.3, they also have free food for athletes. Like they have a huge food tent. They're giving out like half chickens, the guys, a bunch of potatoes, like really, really good food, not just like some shitty slice of pizza. And so at Muncie 70.3, I had brought a ton of recovery stuff. I had brought waters, coconut waters. I had gotten a bunch of foam coolers, ice. I had even got Laird Superfoods to sponsor us. I've got a buddy who's connected to them. I got a bunch of bars and electrolytes from them that I flew from Boulder to Indy with. I had this full setup. And to be honest, I didn't really think that the guys gave a shit about it. I didn't think they used much of it. Partially because there was the free food from Muncie that I wasn't totally expecting. And we were right outside of the finish where they could just easily get all the waters from the race, right? Like some guys still did drink the waters and still did drink the coconut waters that I had gotten. But for the most part, the big recovery setup wasn't totally needed. But now I'm observing the Chattanooga 70.3 finish and just the orientation of where tri teams were putting their tents. It wasn't like right at the exit. That paired with the fact that I was pretty much grinding, I'm like, I 100% need to go get waters and drinks for guys and ice. Now, if you remember, we didn't go do that to go see them on the bike. So all of a sudden, I'm like, fuck, I got to go figure this stuff out. So I send Chunk first to go get the tent and the chairs from Charlie's car. Charlie, shout out to Charlie. He brought a wagon too. So Chunk could just load the stuff in the wagon and wheel it all down. I set up the flag, and my initial thought is really, I don't know if we need the cooler. Let's just bag it. I don't have the drinks anyway. But as I'm setting this up and as I'm really understanding, I actually need some water. I tell Chunk, all right, Chunk, actually, I do need you to go get the cooler and I'm going to go figure out where I can get some drinks. Now, this whole venue setup, it's down in this area where there's like a convention center, there's an aquarium. It's not like downtown where there's a bunch of CVS's and shit like that. I'm looking up CVS's and they're like a mile and a half away. So I'm like, fuck. I got 3 guys in the finish. I got 7 other athletes that are coming into the finish. I got like a 20-minute window of time here where I got to figure this shit out. And I got to set up the tent. I got to set up the chairs. And I got to figure out how the fuck I'm going to get some drinks for guys because they might need it, but I definitely need it. And so I see this like Indian market that's like 2 blocks away. And it happens to be basically on this little brick road that is the exit of the bridge, which happens to be up this massive fucking hill from where the Ironman Expo, the Ironman finish, and the tent setup is. So I'm like, all right, I'm hauling ass. So I sprint and I'm hauling ass a couple of blocks. Then I get to this hill that's a block long. I'm running up this thing. I go to this Indian market and they have super limited resources. I'm like, fuck. They have Powerades. I'm like, whatever. I'm getting 12 Powerades. I'm like, do you guys have ice? They're like, we don't sell ice. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Whatever. So I grab the Powerades and then I'm thinking, how can I run back and how can I get something where I'm just getting ice? I see a Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm like, fine, perfect. I'll run into Buffalo Wild Wings and I'm just going to ask the bartender if they can just scoop ice into these bags. Like, I don't care. I'm running towards the Buffalo Wild Wings and then all of a sudden I see this like gelato coffee shop. Like, it wasn't like a full coffee shop. It was like one of those kind of weird places that like has some gelato shit and some random coffee drinks. I'm like, whatever. They've got a sign on the door for iced coffee. They must have ice. So I run in there. I'm like, listen, do you guys have any ice? They're like, we can't really give you ice because the ice that we have is like special for like our coffee drinks. Like it was some kind of cube special ice. I'm like, but the owner is in there and the owner's like, well, I can sell you a bag of ice. I'm like, even better. Perfect. I'll buy as many bags as you can give me. She's like, well, let me see how many I can give you. She goes in the back. She's like, I can give you 1 bag. I'm like, whatever. I'll take a bag. They've also got waters there. I'm like, I'll take 10 waters. So I load up and now all of a sudden I'm hauling ass. And this is like the shit that I love. Like when I think about why do I love building tribal, like I did this podcast months back on finding your breadcrumbs, right? And what are the things that you loved growing up that are showing up in what you're doing today? And why does it all make sense? This brought me right back to setting up the men's member guest at Glen Hardy Country Club when I'm working in the golf shop and I'm just fucking racing around trying to make sure that everything's set up. And I'm loving it. I'm working hard, but I'm loving it. And so I'm running back down this hill. In my right arm, I got 2 double bags of Powerades, 6 Powerades in each. In my other arm, I got 2 double bags, 5 waters each with another bag that's got ice. And I'm doing farmer's carry sprints down this hill, down the 2 blocks. I'm getting to the tent. I'm huffing and puffing. Trevor and B. Riley are there. They got to be like, what the fuck is this dude doing? I dump all this shit into the cooler. I'm like, okay, Charlie, you're here. Because I had just done all this stuff solo. I'm like, where's Chunk? Chunk is now standing at the at the finishing chute before the finish line. Phil has already finished. So I'm like, all right, Phil is in. I go up to find Chunk and I can just tell that Chunk is really bought into everything going on right now. Chunk is loving. He's been hyping all the guys up on the course, but I can tell that he's tracking Stefanos like very intently. And Stefanos is coming down the home stretch here. And so now I'm trying to organize like, okay, well, I want to be able to make sure that we can go see Dad. And so we want to get back up to this bridge. But the way that this race was set up was that you would basically come off this bridge and then athletes would run straight through the bridge, like another half a block past this Indian market. And then they would make a left, which would sort of loop them down under the bridge. Then they'd come back around and they would end up finishing. If you were going to come off the bridge, the finish would be down to the right. But the way that the athletes went was they went to the left and then on a road that looped under it. But if you were just a spectator, you could just go down to the right. And they had a set of stairs that would totally cut up that huge hill, right? That huge hill that I mentioned that was a street block that was just like a fucking 50-foot gain, 60-foot gain, maybe even more, who knows. I'm like, all right, Chunk, well, we're going to dart up there and we're going to be positioned to see these guys coming through. And I can just tell that Chunk does not want to miss Stefanos. And so all of a sudden, we take off, and Chunk is hightailing it. And we go up these steps, and it's like stressful if you're following the tracker because you have a general sense of where they are, but you don't know exactly where these athletes are going to be. Like the tracker could be off by a little bit. So we get up there, and nobody has passed. So we're like, great. All of a sudden, we see Stefanos coming up, and I see Stefanos walking. And I'm like hyping him up. My arms are up. And as soon as Stefanos sees me, he picks up into a trot. And then he high fives Chunk. Chunk sees Stefanos. Charlie gets a great photo of the two of them high fiving. Stefanos is all smiles. He rolls through. Shortly after that, I think it was Matt Dalton that comes through. I high five Matt Dalton. You know, he's done the damn thing at this point. This is like mile 12. Guys are beyond mile 12 and a half almost. Shortly after that, Logan comes through. And now I'm trying to wonder, where is my dad? I'm looking at the tracker. I'm like, where is my dad? So I see my dad kind of at this far turnaround point that's like a mile or two before the start of the bridge. And I see his tracker at 11.9. And Mason is behind my dad. So I see my dad at 11.9, and Mason's tracker just visually on the map is somewhere farther back. I'm checking a few minutes later, and my dad is still at 11.9. I'm like, well, you know, it could be a glitch, right? But let's see what's going on. I check a few minutes later, and my dad is still at 11.9, and now Mason's tracker has passed him. And I'm like, fuck. My dad is hurting. And, you know, to me, I'm like, I know he was cramping, but it's also like late in a 70.3, like he could be having bathroom problems. He could be sitting in the porta potty. He could be in the porta potty and then cramping up. Like, what is going on? And, you know, we have had these situations in tribal training team races where we have athletes go back out into the course to bring home our finishers. In Ironman Florida 2022, we had Zach Homel, Louie, my mom. They ran out onto the course to bring Adam Sikora home and run down the final half mile with him. At Ironman Florida 2023, we had Trevor. Trevor runs out to find Keith and bring Keith home for the last half mile. And I have never really been in position to do that because I'm doing coach things, right? I'm doing coach shit. I'm with the athletes that had finished, whatever. But this time it's like, this is my dad. This is my dad's first 70.3. Like, I'm 100% staying on the course through him finishing. Whereas typically I would be down like at the finish with the guys who had finished. And I just have this huge voice in my head that's just like, go fucking get him. Let's go. And so I tell Charlie and Chunk, I'm like, I'm going to go get him. I'm going. And so I take off across the bridge, and all that I'm thinking is, where's Mason? I need to find Mason so that Mason can tell me how my dad is doing. Like, Mason just saw my dad. I need some kind of update. And I'm running, and I'm bobbing and weaving through runners, and I'm running in the center of the bridge to jump into the side of the bridge, and I'm looking for Mason, and I see Mason, and Mason looks exactly like he looked on the first lap, soaking wet and full of smiles. And I'm like, Mason, how's my dad doing? And immediately, without even hearing a word out of Mason, I feel at ease just seeing him. And Mason goes, your dad is good, but he's cramping up a lot. And so I'm like, all right, I feel like we're in a fine spot based on what Mason just said, but I'm of course going to go keep getting him. Right. So I finish off this bridge. I take this right, run down this road to the right. And I'm kind of wondering, like, when am I going to see him? I don't know. And I had my run before the race, when everybody was doing that tune-up ride, went along this exact route. So I knew exactly where I was going, which was really just happenstance. And I'm running, and I'm like, am I going to see my dad fucking sprawled out, laying in the grass? Am I going to see him hunched over? And I'm running down this road. I pass the last aid station, and I see my dad up ahead, and he's walking. He's got his hat off, and he's just dumping water on his head. And I'm like, Dad, Dad. And in my head, I'm like, let's fucking go. We totally have this. Like, we are probably 1.5 miles from the finish. That's probably the distance. Where I was with Charlie and Chunk was less than a half a mile, and I probably maybe ran a mile. I don't know. I see my dad. I feel like we're completely fine. I get to him, and he's immediately like, "Am I going to be able to finish? How am I doing on time?" And I'm like, "You are completely fine. Like, we could walk from here, and you would be able to finish." And the next thing that he says is he instantly goes, "Mason is a really good dude. He is a really good dude." He's like, "I was cramping like crazy. I could not move. I was laying in the grass, stretching out my hamstring, and up comes Mason, and Mason stops to help me stretch." And once Mason got my dad, good to go, Mason carries on and continues his race. And his support there had allowed my dad to keep going, which to me was just so special because Mason's whole story of this race is his own redemption, right? He's the one that didn't finish Muncie, right? He made it like 6 minutes into the swim. But Mason stayed the whole damn day to support the rest of the team. He stayed till the finish. He hung after the finish to celebrate everybody, right? And so, as much as I was thinking about this race being about Mason conquering the thing that he didn't do before, right? He did that, but also within the frame of that was supporting everybody else. And so my dad and I, we keep moving along. We get to the aid station that I just passed, and I am like, thank God. I need resources. I need water. And so I'm like, okay, Dad, you're going to be the one that takes the first waters from here. I'm not like announcing this to him, but in my own head, I'm like, make sure my dad gets water. Oh, instantly, I'm snagging 3 waters from the aid station. And, we maybe had a quarter mile from where I'd met my dad to where then the start of the bridge was. So we're crossing over the bridge. I send a video into the team. I tell them that we're bringing it home. We make it up to the center of the bridge, and Chunk and Charlie had come out. So Charlie just gets, the content of my dad and I coming up. And then my dad and Chunk and I conquer the rest of this bridge together. And it's my dad in the middle, me on his left side, and my little brother Chunk on his right side. And, just a freaking special, special, special moment. And, a lot of people on the team, they see my dad doing this, and, I think that they probably know a fraction of the meaning of my dad and I doing this. And, to give some light color, I was born when my parents were in college. My parents were seniors in college when they had me. And, my life is a miracle. And my parents were thrust into fatherhood and motherhood at a time when I think about Chelsea and I. When Chelsea and I were seniors in college, we were fucking blacked out doing slip and slides down the front lawn of SAE. And my parents were like caring for me. And they were thrown into parenting sooner than they expected. And, the stress of being a parent is real for everybody, but fuck, man. I can't even imagine doing that when I was 21. And a lot of the upbringing in my house, right? We had a lot of stress, man. We had a lot of stress. And finances were tight, and my parents were doing everything they could to make it work. My parents were busting their ass and supporting each other and supporting our family and supporting me and supporting my sister Madison and then my youngest brother Chunk. And I know that my dad felt stress, and I know that I felt stress through my dad. And I know that the stress that I felt, sometimes I unloaded that on my little brother. And we've all worked really hard to strengthen and rebuild relationships in different ways between that 3-way dynamic. And my dad to me to my dad to my brother, me to my brother to me, my brother to my dad, right? Every part of it. And to conquer that last mile together on that fucking bridge, damn, man, like, very, very special. And we get to the end of the bridge, and I basically tell my dad, hey, like, you're going to run around this way. We're all going to dart down to the right this way. And I'm going to be at the finish. I'm going to be after the finish line up to the left. That's where I'll be. And so I head down there. We sprint, right? And I get down to the finish, and they just got the finish line music, man. The high energy accomplishment music. And there is just an energy coursing through my body that is like out of body. I have like chills. And it's like, this is fucking happening. My dad is about to finish his first 70.3. This is about to be a stamp on my dad and I completely rebuilding our relationship together. Oh, and not only that, my dad is bringing up the rear of my team. And tribal training is going 10 for fucking 10. And I'm just like, I got to capture this. And so I film a video, send it into the team. I don't think I sent it until afterwards because I was just like filming it and whatever. But it was like, dude, just like the energy. I'm like, this is it, man. This is life. This is so special. And every single person that's a part of this experience has given more than they thought they would ever need to give. And as a result of that, like, we are feeling this transcendence in this moment. Let's go. And so I get up to my spot, and there's some guy there. And I'm like, listen, guy, my dad's going to come through and I'm going in right here. I was like, I just want you to know. I just want you to know. I'm charging right in here. And I should have been a little bit more aware because he was holding up a phone trying to record somebody. And he's like, we should have had a finisher 3 minutes ago. I'm like, I hear you. I don't care. My dad is coming through and I am getting right here. And I'm looking, I'm wondering where he's going to be. Every single person, I'm like, is that my dad? Is that the kid? Is that my dad? Is that the kid? It's taken longer than I expect. And then all of a sudden, I hear the announcer, Jeff Dreyer. And I'm like, here he fucking comes. And he comes through, puts his hands in the air, comes over to me, and I just start bawling out. Bawling my eyes out. And I figured I would. But 2 minutes before, I'm like, dude, the most powerful energy of all time is coursing through my veins. Like, I have goosebumps. Powerful goosebumps. I'm at the highest of highs, right? I feel like I could conquer the world. And this is just the power of Iron Man, is that 2 minutes later, it doesn't mean that I'm not still feeling all those things, but like, I feel like I've done it. So I can release the weight of it. And now I'm brought to tears. And my dad and I are just sobbing together, man. Sobbing together. I don't know, 30-second hug, minute hug, 10 minutes. I have no idea how long it was. Just crying in each other's arms after accomplishing that together. Once we kind of gather ourselves, my dad heads through the finishing chute, right, to get his medal, get his hat, get his waters. I turn to Chunk, who's right there, and I start sobbing again. Sobbing into his shoulder. And Chunk has seen it all. He's seen like the dark depths that my dad and I had been over the past decade, 2 decades, whatever. And Chunk just told me that he was so fucking proud of me. That was what he said. and that stuck with me. And it also stuck with me that Charlie fucking Garwood, man, I owe this guy. In the past 5 weeks, this dude has seen me bawl my eyes out into my sister's arms, bawl my eyes out into my dad's arms, bawl my eyes out into my brother's arms. And now people see, right? My brother is signed up for Chattanooga 70.3. My sister was at Zion. My dad just did this. My mom's been a part of the tribe for a while. Team Dryer didn't do any of this shit when I was growing up, man. This is all brand new to us. And it feels incredible to be capturing it in real time and documenting it. And I feel very grateful for that. Chunk and Charlie and I, we walk around and we see my dad then, exiting. He's got the medal around his neck. It's so cool. We're walking over towards the team tent, and I actually get shouted out by my original triathlon coach, Cheyenne McGregor, raced at Chattanooga. And I'd hit her up. I'm like, hey, I'm here. I know you're racing. I'd love to see you, but hopefully we just cross paths. I know you're doing your thing. And she was like one of the first people that inspired me in endurance. She's a mom of 3. She's a professional physical therapist. She does triathlon coaching. She's an athlete herself. And she just showed me, like, dude, if you commit to yourself, you can do it all. You can do it all. You can make it all work. And I was coached by her to my first Ironman. And I've stayed in touch with her, and we've had a great relationship since. And I hadn't seen her, so it was cool to see her for a moment, say what's up, introduce her to my fam, get a picture with Charlie, and then we continue on over to the team finish, the team hangout, and we got post-race vibes, accomplishment vibes, shared accomplishment, togetherness, and I was able to check in with everybody. How'd the race go, man? You looked so great out there, right? And that was the thing about the whole team, is that everybody to me they looked steady. Nobody out there, I didn't see any single athlete looking like they were dying, ever. Maybe the worst I saw an athlete all day was my dad coming out of the swim, which, you're coming out of the swim. In some sense, you're supposed to look like shit. You're supposed to be discombobulated, right? And my dad had eventually shared that really he was thrown off because the stairs coming out of the swim, there wasn't like a ramp exit. You had to kind of pull yourself up to some stairs, and he had kind of had his hammy cramp up then. So he was a little bit like, what the fuck? But no, we were hanging there, and we got some great pictures with all the guys, soaking it up. Families are there. It was really, really special. And perhaps I'll close this up with the team hangout after the race. We all went to this brewery that I thought it had barbecue. Ended up having some fantastic smash burgers, no barbecue. Fine, adapt and overcome. But that was the first time that we've ever had the team like go grab beers together post race. That's not always the vibe of what we have going on, and not everybody came to that. But that was really fun. We had Aaron, myself, my dad, Trevor, Charlie, Mason, his girlfriend Aubrey, Stefanos' cousin, and we were just laughing and shooting the shit. And we're laughing about Stefanos and the Chicago story, and we're laughing about Aaron and the 650 calories, and we're laughing about my dad and the sunscreen, and we're hearing all about Mason's race, and we're hearing all about Trevor's race. And Charlie is just being a homie, and he's pulling photos from his computer right there, and we're all wolfing down food, and it was just a great way to cap off a really, really memorable experience. I am going to do some more podcasts on this, but it is 11:37, and I got to go get my mom from the airport. So I am wrapping up this podcast. Thank you for listening. I will be back with more. For now, let's fucking go.